Forbes Kennedy wasn't just a hockey player. He was a 5'8" wrecking ball of chaos, heart, and raw determination. In an era dominated by towering enforcers and quiet respect, Kennedy broke the mold. He chirped, he hit, he fought, and he did it all with a mischievous grin and a fire that never burned out. With 888 career penalty minutes and a highlight reel full of brawls, big plays, and unforgettable moments, Forbes Kennedy became one of the NHL's most unpredictable and electrifying figures. But there's more to the story than the fists and penalties. Kennedy's journey from frozen backyard ponds in Prince Edward Island to hockey's biggest stages is a gritty underdog tale packed with humor, resilience, and heart. He played like the puck owed him money and coached like every kid mattered. From legendary fights to mentoring the next generation, Forbes Kennedy's legacy is as wild as it is inspiring. This is the untold story of a hockey rebel who refused to be forgotten. Stick around. You won't believe how far one scrappy center went to leave his mark on the game. On August 18, 1935, in the quiet mill town of Dorchester, New Brunswick, Forbes Taylor Kennedy entered the world as the sixth child in a tight-knit working-class family. The Kennedys lived in a modest clapboard house near the edge of town, where the hum of the local sawmill punctuated daily life. Forbes' father, James, toiled long hours at the mill, his hands calloused from handling timber, while his mother, Margaret, managed the household with a blend of warmth and discipline. In a family of 8, resources were scarce, but love and resilience were plentiful. Hockey was more than a pastime in the Maritimes. It was a cultural cornerstone, a rite of passage that united communities during long, bitter winters. For the Kennedy children, skating wasn't optional. It was as essential as breathing. By age 4, Forbes was already trailing his older siblings to the frozen ponds that dotted Dorchester's outskirts. His first skates, hand-me-downs from his brother Robert, were too big, forcing him to stuff the toes with newspaper. Small for his age, wiry, and perpetually curious, Forbes compensated for his stature with relentless energy. He'd chase his brothers and sisters across the ice, tumbling into snowbanks, but always scrambling back up, his cheeks flushed with determination. Those early days taught him a lesson that would define his career. Size didn't dictate impact. Leverage, timing, and sheer will could topple even the tallest opponents. His siblings, particularly his older brother Thomas, were his first coaches, goading him to skate faster, stick handle sharper, and never back down from a challenge. The Kennedy household buzzed with activity, but it was also a place of structure. James, a man of few words, instilled a fierce work ethic in his children, often saying, "If you're going to do something, do it right, or don't bother." Margaret, with her quick wit and endless patience, kept the family grounded, sewing patches onto worn hockey jerseys and serving hearty meals of cod stew and molasses bread. Forbes, though the second youngest, was never coddled. He shoveled snow, chopped firewood, and helped mend fences, tasks that built the physical toughness he'd later bring to the rink. At night, the family gathered around a crackling radio, listening to NHL broadcasts from Montreal or Toronto, dreaming of a world far beyond Dorchester's mills and marshes. Hockey was the Kennedy children's escape and ambition. The backyard, blanketed in snow, became their arena, with tin cans as pucks and broken branches as sticks. Forbes, barely 5, would dart between his siblings, learning to anticipate their moves and steal the puck before they could react. His quickness and cunning stood out, even among older kids. Neighbors began to notice the scrawny boy who played with the intensity of someone twice his size. "That Kennedy kid," they'd say. "He's small, but he's got fire." That fire, paired with an insatiable curiosity about the game, set Forbes apart. He'd spend hours mimicking radio descriptions of Maurice "Rocket" Richards' blazing rushes, imagining himself weaving through NHL defensemen. In 1943, when Forbes was 8, the Kennedys relocated to Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island, seeking better opportunities. The move was a jolt for the family, trading Dorchester's familiar rhythms for the island's windswept coastlines and red clay cliffs. Charlottetown, with its bustling harbor and tight-knit community, offered a fresh start. For Forbes, it was a hockey paradise. PEI's winters transformed ponds, rivers, and schoolyards into rinks, and the island's hockey culture was fervent, with every town boasting teams that drew crowds of scarf-wrapped fans. The Kennedys settled into a small house near the city's edge, close enough to local rinks for Forbes to hear the scrape of blades from his bedroom window. Charlottetown's rinks became Forbes' second home. At 9, he was skating before dawn, his breath clouding in the frigid air as he practiced pivots and dekes. His classmates swore his blades carved figure eights in their dreams, a testament to his relentless drills. At home, he turned fence posts into imaginary defensemen, weaving forehand, backhand, and the occasional playful uppercut. Because creativity didn't stop at stick handling. Schoolyard games were his proving ground, where he ignored taunts about his 5 feet 8 inches, 150-pound frame, and answered with speed and tenacity. Bigger kids tried to bully him off the puck, but Forbes, with a sly grin, would slip past, leaving them clutching air. "Kid, you're too small," coaches often grumbled, echoing a refrain he'd hear for years. His response, delivered with a smirk, became legendary. "Good. Easier target to miss." School was a mixed bag for Forbes. He was bright but restless, more interested in diagramming breakout plays than memorizing multiplication tables. His teachers, exasperated by his fidgeting, often sent him outside to burn off energy, unaware they were fueling a future NHL star. Hockey was his true classroom, where every bruise taught a lesson. By 12, he was playing organized minor hockey with Charlottetown's Pee-wee teams, wearing patch gloves and second-hand sticks his family could barely afford. The Kennedys scraped by, with James working overtime and Margaret taking in sewing to cover registration fees. Forbes felt the weight of their sacrifices and vowed to make them proud, pouring every ounce of effort into his game. His talent soon caught the eye of local coaches. At 14, Forbes joined a bantam team that traveled across PEI, facing off against bigger, rougher squads from Summerside and Montague. He was fearless, diving into corners for loose pucks and emerging with possession, or a fresh welt. Scouts from mainland junior leagues began to whisper about the scrappy kid from Charlottetown, who played like he had something to prove. Forbes idolized NHL stars like Richard, not for their goals, but for their fire, and he carried that intensity into every shift. He'd study grainy newsreels of Montreal Canadiens games, memorizing Richard's low center of gravity and explosive bursts, then replicate them on PEI's frozen ponds. At 16, Forbes left home to chase his NHL dream, signing with a junior team in Trois-Rivières, Quebec. The transition was jarring. He traded Charlottetown's familiar rinks for dingy arenas and endless bus rides through Quebec's snow-choked highways. The junior leagues were a proving ground, filled with bigger, older players who saw the wiry Maritimer as an easy target. Forbes proved them wrong, using his speed and cunning to outmaneuver defensemen and his fists to answer cheap shots. He lived in a cramped boarding house, sharing a room with 2 teammates, and survived on diner eggs and instant coffee. The loneliness was tough, but letters from his mother, tucked into care packages of homemade fudge, kept him grounded. Junior hockey honed Forbes' skills and toughness. He played center, a position that demanded versatility, scoring, playmaking, face-offs, and defense. At 5 feet 8 inches and 150 pounds, he relied on agility and anticipation, reading plays before they unfolded. His coaches marveled at his work ethic, noting how he'd stay late to practice one-timers or shadow box in the locker room to sharpen his reflexes. Teammates nicknamed him Sparky for his electric energy, but opponents called him worse, frustrated by his knack for stealing pucks and chirping them into mistakes. Forbes didn't just play hockey, he waged psychological warfare, grinning as he skated away from fuming rivals. By 19, Forbes was a standout in the Quebec Junior Hockey League, earning a tryout with the Chicago Blackhawks minor league affiliate in Buffalo. The American Hockey League was a step closer to the NHL, but it was no glamour circuit. Bus rides reeked of damp leather and stale sweat, and arenas were often half empty, with hecklers louder than fans. Forbes thrived in the grind, scoring clutch goals and racking up penalty minutes with equal gusto. His style, equal parts finesse and ferocity, caught the attention of Chicago's scouts. In 1956, at 21, he got the call, a roster spot with the Blackhawks. For a kid from PEI, it was a miracle, a chance to skate on the same ice as his idols. The NHL of 1956 was a 6-team league, a gentleman's club of broad-shouldered bruisers from Quebec and Ontario. Rock and roll blared from jukeboxes, television sets invaded living rooms, and hockey was a brutal, beautiful spectacle. Forbes Kennedy arrived in Chicago's sweater as a rookie who treated every shift like a fight for survival. At 5 feet 8 inches and 150 pounds, he was dwarfed by giants like Gordie Howe. But he skated with a chip on his shoulder, chasing pucks into corners where wiser players coasted. He chirped veterans twice his size, his maritime drawl cutting through the din, and emerged from scrums with the puck or a fresh scar, often both. Chicago's fans, used to the Blackhawks' hard-nosed style, embraced the feisty newcomer. Coaches, including Tommy Ivan, wavered between awe and exasperation. "Kennedy's got guts," Ivan once said, "but he's going to get himself killed." Teammates gave him extra bench space, sensing something unpredictable was always brewing. Forbes played center, anchoring the third line and killing penalties. His 70 goals and 108 assists over 603 career games would later reflect reliable depth scoring. But his 888 penalty minutes, nearly 15 hours in the sin bin, told a louder story. Those minutes weren't random. They were the mark of a player who fought like a bantamweight Tasmanian devil, often winking at the organ player mid-scuffle. Forbes' rookie season was a crash course in NHL realities. Helmets were optional, dental plans non-existent, and fights settled scores that refs ignored. He learned to absorb hits from players like Detroit's Ted Lindsay and answer with sneaky jabs that left opponents dazed. His first NHL goal, scored against Montreal's Jacques Plante in December 1956, was a deflection off a low wrister, celebrated with a grin that hid his pounding heart. Fans chanted "Sparky" from the stands, and Forbes, for the first time, felt the weight of their expectations. He wasn't just playing for himself anymore. He was carrying PEI's pride. Over 13 seasons, 1956 to 1969, Forbes became hockey's compact chaos engine, playing for 5 storied franchises: Chicago, Detroit, Boston, Philadelphia, and Toronto. His journeyman status wasn't a demotion, but a testament to his versatility. He was a Swiss Army center, scorer, playmaker, penalty killer, face-off specialist, and enforcer when needed. His stat line, 70 goals, 108 assists, 178 points, showed offensive contributions, but his 888 penalty minutes screamed his true impact. In 1968-69, he led the NHL in penalties, earning an anti-hero's crown he wore with a shrug. At 5 feet 8 inches, he defied the era's obsession with size, proving heart and nerve could carve a legacy in a league built for giants. Each franchise brought new challenges. In Detroit, he skated alongside Howe, learning the art of subtle intimidation. In Boston, he faced rabid fans who booed his every touch, fueling his fire. Philadelphia's rough-and-tumble style suited him, but Toronto, where he landed in 1967, became his defining stage. The Maple Leafs, fresh off a 1967 Stanley Cup, were a team of veterans and upstarts with Forbes as their spark plug. He killed penalties, took clutch face-offs, and stirred chaos when games grew stale. His chirps, equal parts wit and venom, rattled opponents, and his fists backed them up. Toronto fans adored him, chanting, "Forbes, Forbes," as he skated to the sin bin. Forbes' career crystallized on April 2, 1969, at Boston Garden during Game 1 of the Stanley Cup first-round series. The Toronto Maple Leafs faced the Boston Bruins in a packed arena, buzzing with tension. Boston's Bobby Orr, the game's golden boy, carried the city's hopes on his electrifying knees. Mid-game, Toronto's Pat Quinn leveled Orr with a thunderous hit, leaving him sprawled and the crowd stunned. Gasps echoed through the rafters. Enter Forbes Kennedy, Toronto's feisty center, who answered the Bruins' glares not with words but with fists. In seconds, Forbes sparked 4 separate brawls, each more frantic than the last. Gloves littered the ice like confetti, and linesmen struggled to intervene. He traded punches with Boston's toughest, his left jab a blur. In the chaos, he accidentally clipped a linesman with a hook meant for an opponent. a grave error in an era when officials were untouchable. The crowd roared, some in rage, others in awe. Forbes was ejected, showered with booze, and later suspended by the NHL for 4 games, a harsh penalty for the time. Toronto's bench felt his absence, and the Leafs lost the series. The team cut ties soon after, deeming him a liability. The penalty box, once his throne, stood eerily quiet. That night could have broken him. Toronto media painted him as a villain, and general managers whispered that refs would target any team carrying him. Forbes, however, was wired for resilience. He refused to let one night define him, even as it became hockey lore. Grainy black and white clips of the melee, now staples on YouTube, show a 5'8" dynamo who turned chaos into art, his sly grin defying the booze. In 1972, Forbes sought a comeback with the Los Angeles Sharks of the World Hockey Association, a rival league promising fresh starts. At 37, he still had the fire, but a training camp injury, a torn ligament in his knee, shredded his dream like an over-taped stick blade. Surgery and rehab couldn't restore his NHL speed, and the WHA chapter closed before it began. Many players would have sulked, but Forbes pivoted with the same instincts that made him a rink terror. He turned to coaching, channeling his passion into mentorship. In 1969-70, before the WHA attempt, Forbes had dipped into coaching with the Cape Breton Metros, a maritime junior A team brimming with raw talent and runaway egos. At 34, he was a rookie bench boss, driving buses through snowstorms, taping sticks, and dispensing wisdom at 3 a.m. diners. His mantra, "Skate like the puck owes you money," became a rallying cry. Players, some barely younger than him, trusted his scars, each one a footnote to his advice. Speed wins, body position matters, and courage must be tempered with smarts. "Take the hit if you must," he'd say, "but steal the puck on your way by." The WHA injury cemented coaching as his calling. Over decades, Forbes led teams across North America: Halifax Junior Canadians, Summerside Crystals, Winston-Salem Polar Twins, Richmond Wildcats, and back home with the Charlottetown Eagles and Abbeys. He coached in rinks that smelled of mildew and hope, often for little pay. In Winston-Salem, he taught Southern-born players the game's nuances, laughing as they mispronounced "deek." In Halifax, he molded teenagers into scholarship hopefuls, handwriting letters to college scouts. His practices were grueling, endless skating drills, but his humor kept players loose. He'd mimic their sloppy passes with a grin, then show them the right way, his hands still calloused from his playing days. On Prince Edward Island, Forbes became a folk hero. Kids traded his bubblegum cards, coveting the one, showing him smirking from the penalty box. Arena janitors greeted him like family, swapping stories over coffee. He volunteered for minor hockey practices, coaching peewees with the same intensity he brought to NHL rinks. Parents huddled over thermoses in the stands, marveled at his patience with their kids, many of whom learned to skate with purpose under his watch. His legacy wasn't just in goals or fights, but in the players he shaped, some who earned scholarships, others who carried his lessons into adulthood. Forbes' coaching philosophy was rooted in his own journey. He preached resilience, telling players, "The puck doesn't care how big you are." He taught sneaky body positioning, showing wingers how to nudge defensemen off balance without drawing a whistle. Above all, he instilled respect for teammates, opponents, and even refs, a nod to his own hard-earned wisdom. His practices ended with life lessons, delivered in a maritime drawl. "Hockey's tough, but so's life. Keep showing up." In the mid-1980s, Forbes coached the Charlottetown Eagles, leading them to provincial titles. In the late 1990s, he returned to guide the Abbeys, mentoring a new generation. Between stints, he ran clinics, fixed equipment, and drove kids to tournaments in his beat-up station wagon. His presence was a constant in PEI's rinks, a reminder that greatness didn't require a spotlight. In 2012, the Summerside Western Capitals honored him with a dedicated game, projecting a montage of his toe drags, tilts, and fist pumps onto the score clock. The crowd's roar shook the rafters as Forbes, white-haired but spry, accepted a plaque and playfully cross-checked the mascot, his grin as mischievous as ever. In 2019, at 84, Forbes took a different stage, leading the audience at Charlottetown's Confederation Center of the Arts in Canada, alongside the Prince Edward Island Symphony Orchestra. Dressed in a crisp blazer, his voice steady, he stood tall, a former enforcer turned cultural ambassador. The moment was surreal. A man whose 888 penalty minutes defined an era now conducting a hymn of unity. It resonated because Forbes' life was a study in contrasts. A small-statured scrapper who punched above his weight, a suspended villain who became a beloved mentor, a player whose chaos coexisted with a legacy of teaching respect. The anthem wasn't a one-off. Forbes remained a fixture in Charlottetown, attending charity events, speaking at schools, and visiting rinks. He gardened tomatoes, fished the Northumberland Strait, and shared stories of his playing days with wide-eyed kids. His handshake, firm despite his age, carried the strength of a life well lived. His laugh, equal parts mischief and warmth, could light up a room. Ask about Bobby Orr, and he'd grin. He was faster than my thoughts, so I slowed things down my way. Ask about coaching, and his eyes would soften. Kids keep me young, even when their parents make me feel ancient. Regrets. He'd glance at the ice, where a young skater practiced crossovers, and shrug. Everything I did got me here. Why erase it? In 2025, Forbes Kennedy's story, maritime grit, NHL chaos, and quiet redemption resonates across eras. He played when fights were settled on the ice, and streaming meant being in the arena, yet his spirit fits the digital age, where underdog tales and viral moments thrive. His 70 goals may not dazzle, but his 888 penalty minutes, 108 assists, and countless coach players paint a fuller picture. A Swiss Army center who did it all while mentoring the next generation. YouTube storytellers could craft a documentary, opening with the 1969 melee in grainy black and white, then cutting to high-definition shots of Forbes laughing with peewees. The Hook, a little center who turned penalties into poetry, proving legacy isn't about stats but about echoes in others' triumphs. Forbes' saga is a Zamboni track, grooved, rough, and full of pivots. From Dorchester's ponds to Boston Garden's infamy, from WHA dreams to maritime rinks. He's the scrappy maestro who reminds us that size doesn't limit impact, mistakes don't end stories, and reinvention outlasts all. His highlight reel, etched in grainy clips and small-town banners, still plays for anyone craving a hit of hockey chaos wrapped in heart. At nearly 90, Forbes remains PEI's living legend, a testament to the power of resilience and the enduring pull of the game he loved.